Hello and welcome to Monday's Hotline Live with Record Sport. My name is Daniel Caw and I am joined, as always, by the man, the myth, the legend, the one and only Keith Jackson. Keith, how's it going?
I'm all right, Daniel. How's yourself?
I'm very good, thanks. It's the start of a big week in Scottish football, huge,
Yep, and you've left me here in the studio alone again.
and I've left my glasses, which is an absolute nightmare.
Can
So,
you see what you're doing there, Mr. Magoo?
see if I get a few things wrong, you know why. Watching at home, I'm sure I'll be fine though. Massive week. Starting. Sorry, go on.
No, it's just they just keeps on coming, doesn't it? That is the great thing about Scottish football. It's just a madhouse, and it never really slows down. It's just the next thing. What's the next thing? Where are we going next? And yeah, I mean, what a week. Obviously Thursday night, Jose Mourinho brings Fenerbahce to town. Who knows what is in store at Ibrox that night? I mean, Rangers are the great unpredictables. So who knows what we're going to get there, and then it all rolls over to Celtic Park on the Sunday for Old Firm Day. We've got a Scottish Cup last quarter final tonight between Livingston and St Johnstone. So yeah, everywhere you look, there's something going on.
Aye, I mean, it's funny because people can slag the standard in Scottish football, but it's so fascinating. Like,
somebody once summed it up perfectly, Daniel. Scottish football, maybe the standard isn't the greatest all the time, but the stories are world class.
Aye.
And that's where we do our business. So yeah, it's there's always drama, there's always intrigue, and it's utterly fascinating now to look forward to Thursday night. Does Barry Ferguson get to keep Jose Mourinho if he beats him twice in a week? Does that mean, as I rather suspect it might, he really becomes a serious candidate for the Rangers job on a longer term basis? And then, what if he goes to Celtic Park and it all goes spectacularly wrong? Does he get his name chopped off the list again? What if it goes spectacularly right? Mm-hmm. Is he just basically, a one-man show at that point? There's so many different elements. It's utterly fascinating, totally compelling, and that's just Scottish football all over the back, isn't it?
Aye, it's really compelling because we've actually been running a poll on Record Sport Online, asking fans who they want to see as the next permanent Rangers manager. It's been up for a good few weeks now. Barry Ferguson was on the list. The results were quite interesting, I thought.
Surely Barry Ferguson wouldn't have been on the list weeks ago. Is that right?
I know. I said on air that I prepared this poll, I think, as Philippe Clement was still in situ. So sorry, Philippe, if you're watching. But we could see the writing was on the wall. Yeah. Kevin Muscat came first. Mm-hmm. 2,500 votes almost. Kevin Muscat came out on top, which I find quite interesting, I think.
Well, I think he was a very serious candidate last time around before Clement got it. I actually felt he was the better bet for Rangers at that point. I think he's got something. But I also think that I don't think he felt particularly well treated through the process.
I was going to ask Keith, was he interviewed?
Yeah. He got through the interviewing process. I think Graham Souness was on a Zoom call with him, members of the board at the time. I think he was a bit bruised by that experience. And he obviously then founded another club. I think he's still in China, isn't he? Shanghai Port, I think. I think he was just coming to the end of his time at Yokohama at that particular moment, and it seemed I thought he was a real strong candidate. I thought he was a better bet for the job than Philippe Clement, to be perfectly frank with you. And I was quite surprised that they went with Clement in front of him, but probably not as surprised as Kevin Muscat. I think he's doing well again in the Asian Champions League this season. This one wouldn't feel to me as if it'd be the right time. And I wonder if there is a little bit of scar tissue left over from the way he was sort of knocked out the process last time around.
Aye.
Who knows? Big job, and he's certainly got a feeling for the club. Certainly a job that he wanted 18 months ago. So, you know, if Rangers were to go, I'm not saying go cap in hand, but a different Rangers board, make a new approach, who knows, maybe you can't rule it out. But I just wonder if the previous experience there might count against him, and also he's in, you know, a good position. He obviously has no issues with working in Asia. Australians don't look at that the way that, you know, Europeans might. So I can understand why there'll be Rangers fans out there that like the idea of Muscat last time around, that would, you know, be very keen to see it re-explored. But I would find that one doubtful.
Aye. Did you see, just going back to Barry Ferguson, he's mentioned that poll, obviously, and as I say, it's a bit skewed because he wouldn't have been in the running, you know, 4 weeks ago. But I would go as far, and again, it's just my opinion, I'd go as far as to say, see if he puts Mourinho and Fenerbahce out on Thursday and wins at Celtic Park, which I'm not confident he'll do, but see if
Big
that
ifs.
were, huge ifs. But if that were to happen, I think he'd have 1 foot in the job. I don't see how you could go with anyone else at that point, personally.
I think it would become very difficult because if just use your scenario there, your circumstances. Let's rewind till, you know, just even last week. It would have seemed far-fetched to imagine that Barry Ferguson comes from nowhere to become an interim manager and then lands the job. But that was before the first leg at Fenerbahce. And that changed everything, the whole dynamic around the whole thing. Suddenly, it became a lot less far-fetched, given the nature of that performance. The fact that he changed the setup, that he tactically outmanoeuvred Mourinho on the night. These are all massive ticks in the box. I think the fact that Andrew Kavanagh was there in person to see that is another massive tick in the box. And as we said last night, I wonder now if Andrew Kavanagh has plans to come to Ibrox this week to see and feel what the place is like on a big European night when the fans are actually reconnected with their team. Because his previous Ibrox experiences have been far from that. He's seen what it's like at rock bottom, basically. You know, fans revolting, walking out the stadium, protests, booing each other. You know, the whole thing was totally fractured, totally gone. Manager that was just a lame duck. This will be an entirely different environment. And I think if he comes and experiences that environment, that version of Ibrox, and if Barry Ferguson can kind of repeat what he did against Mourinho first time round, I think the whole landscape changes in terms of the debate about, you know, who's a realistic candidate. I still think there'll be a lot of Rangers fans out there that want something, you know, out of the box. They're thinking that 49ers are going to come in, therefore money's no object, so, you know, go and get some huge name. I don't know if that's likely or not. What I do believe is that if Barry Ferguson can finish off the job against Jose Mourinho, there's a massive feather in his managerial cap. And then if he can go to Celtic Park and make Rangers look competitive, get something, avoid defeat, then I think, I think he's in a really, really strong place. I also think that he's been impressing the people that are in there. Now, I know the American takeover, you know, is ongoing and could be another few weeks before it's completed, so they're not in the driving seat to make these decisions. But I think the people that are on the board just now, and I'm talking chiefly about the new chief executive and the chairman recently appointed, I get a funny feeling that I think they've been quite impressed. They've been close to this. They've been monitoring. They've seen the changes that are being made around Ibrox on match days and Auchenhowie through the week. I think they've been quite impressed by Barry Ferguson. And do you know why I think it? Is because, you know, we've seen all manner of imposters coming in and out through the front doors at Rangers over the last decade or so. There's been, you know, the PowerPoint presentation people and, you know, people with you know, textbooks of jargon, and further Rangers have fallen away from what they're meant to be and what they always were. And I think that there's a sort of unpolished authenticity about Barry Ferguson and his coaching staff. And I think people are enjoying it because they're getting honesty. Nobody's making excuses. They know that they've hardly been given a perfect hand here. It's a duff hand of cards. But they're trying to improve it, and they're doing it in a very honest and authentic way. And I think that people around the club that are watching this have been impressed. So there's another reason that you just can't rule it out. But, you know, what's the old cliche? Football's a results business, isn't it? If things were to go wrong for Rangers against Fenerbahce, that atmosphere that we're talking about, you know, that'll quickly turn. And it could become a rather sour experience. And Barry Ferguson would then be accused, I'm guessing, of, you know, he's not got enough experience, he's been taken to school, he had Mourinho by the throat and he let him get loose. There's one reason why you can't, you know, as much as people will respect him and admire him and thank him for all the work he's done, if he gets outfoxed in the second leg, and Rangers give up the 2-goal lead, then he'll be accused that'll be his fault. Similarly, if he goes to Celtic Park and, you know, he's up against another titan in Brendan Rodgers, and if Brendan, and clearly Brendan Rodgers has got far better players to work with, a far better team structure, and just a winning mentality that courses through Lennoxtown. So there's the potential there for that to become a really awkward afternoon. It could get out of hand really quickly if Celtic attack the game the way that we've seen them do it previously. So all these are imponderables, but that's what we're talking about at the start of the show, Daniel. It's delicious Scottish football, isn't it? Because you just sit back and you watch and you wonder what the next course is going to be. And there's always something incredible.
It's never boring.
Comes at you. Yeah.
Well, look, this talking point is obviously generated quite a big response in the comment section. If you're watching at home, please get involved in the discussion. I'm taking an absolute power of stick already for saying that I couldn't see past Barry Ferguson if he wins the next 2 games. John says Clement had a blistering start to his Rangers career. The wheels came off pretty quickly. It doesn't matter what Barry does in his next 2 games or the rest of the season. This one from CSC, you can't see anyone else. The guy who got embarrassed by Motherwell at Ibrox, short memory, you cheerleaders. Marzuno says, it was Rangers need a top manager to take on Brendan, now it's a virtual novice. And there's a lot of people actually, Keith, talking up Steven Gerrard. Craigie says, Steven Gerrard will be back next season, Barry will be his number 2. And
I've heard the rumour.
CSC again says it's common knowledge within Ibrox Stevie G's agreed to return if he can sort his tax-free wages from Saudi.
Well, that'll be a big if.
That's a huge if, aye.
And I think, you know, but you know, it's not insurmountable because Jota found a way of getting the finances, the financial side of it, to work for him to return to Celtic. So it's not impossible. But I think it becomes awkward. I mean, look at Jordan Henderson, for example. Rather than return to Britain, he went to Ajax when he'd kind of get fed up with football in Saudi. So, yeah, I've heard the rumour. How much substance there is to it, I don't know. And as I keep saying, it's really going to be at the discretion of the incoming new owners. And they'll be a tough nut to crack in terms of trying to get information out of them. And I don't think that anybody in this country right now has really gotten in with them enough to be able to say with any sort of certainty what their plan is right now for the next manager. That's why I'm saying that the Barry Ferguson thing is interesting, because if he can build up a real head of steam and momentum and the fans go with him, then no matter what the Americans might have in mind, they might have an awkward situation where, you know, if Barry Ferguson is achieving bigger and better than anybody might reasonably have expected, well, would you definitely want to push ahead and make that change? Because they've got a lot to sort out at the club, so they might feel that they've got a guy in there that is bringing the fans with them, is getting results, and you know, it's one problem they don't need to confront, because there's going to be no shortage of other problems which will need to be tackled head on right from the start if they're going to make the sort of impact that they clearly want to make.
Aye. Rangers easy okay makes a good point. He says, I love Fergie. The only way I'd want him as manager if he wins the Europa League. That's not the good point I'm referring to. Not sure who I fancy, to be honest, but Gerrard's name keeps appearing. Wouldn't be able to stomach Beale as the number 2, though. You forget that, obviously, Michael Beale was the kind of allegedly the brains behind the operation when Steven Gerrard was in charge.
Yeah, look how that turned out.
Well,
look, do you know what? That's probably unfair. I think you can have a tactical brain and maybe not necessarily have the leadership qualities, maybe, in terms of man management, dealing with people. So maybe it's a partnership that works, but, you know, I don't know. I would find that scenario unlikely.
Do you think, Keith, if Gerrard came back, that would be a good appointment? Put you in the spot there, but there you go.
Do you know what? He obviously made an impact at Rangers. And I know people will say, well, he only won the one trophy, but it was a big one, the big one. And I think it's, you know, I don't think he was a spectacular success at Rangers, but year on year you could see that his team was improving. They were moving in the right direction. They were heading towards a team being capable of winning a title, and then they won it. So did he do a good job at Rangers? Well, it wasn't spectacularly successful, but ultimately it got them where they wanted to be, which was back to the champions of Scotland. Steven Gerrard's career since leaving Rangers hasn't really set any fires, has he? He's not been pulling up trees. I don't think he's done anything since leaving Rangers that would give you further belief that he's a top manager in the making.
Yeah.
In fact, you would maybe say that the other thing is true. The opposite is true. He did a difficult time, Aston Villa. It didn't end well for him, obviously. And then the fact that he's replaced and the successor comes in, and within weeks, Villa are motoring, and you know that. And again, that's a top class manager you're talking about there as well. But it doesn't reflect very well on Steven Gerrard that he was having issues there, and Villa became instantly improved when he left. He's then gone to Saudi. You know, I think any either young player or young aspiring manager that goes to Saudi Arabia, I think there's a question mark there. Because, you know, is it the love of the game or the love of the cash? And so I don't think he's enhanced his reputation by going there. So yeah, I can understand again there'll be some Rangers fans that would be crying out for it because that's the way they won the last title. That's the manager that did it for them. But I don't think I haven't seen much in what Steven Gerrard's done since leaving Rangers, and over these, you know, that he had a pretty bad start to his title defence, didn't he? Things didn't look particularly great. So no, me personally, I could see why it could happen. I could see why he's a person of interest. I think it might be a retrograde step.
Mm-hmm. Well, there is a match on tonight that we talked about earlier, Keith. It's at Almonvale between Livingston and St Johnstone. Record Sports' Michael Gannon is there. I just tried to add him in there, and I think his signal's gone. So we'll hopefully...
He just dropped out, didn't he?
We'll hopefully get him back any minute. We've got tons of comments coming in, though, on this, so keep them coming. Mick, there he is. Good evening, Mick.
Evening, chaps.
How the world's worst Wi-Fi there, Mick, aye?
The wonders of technology.
I think it sounds like I'm a rather ropey, livy Wi-Fi here, obviously Almond Vale. It's a bit jumpy, I'm afraid.
Like Tony Macaroni.
It's obviously look the game tonight. I know it's obviously probably lowest profile, if that's the right way of saying it, quarter final. But this could be This could be the playoff at the end of the season as well, the relegation playoff.
Yeah,
it's kinda
the two
interesting.
sides could get to know each other quite well, couldn't they?
Mm-hmm.
St Johnstone are going to have to go something to get themselves out of bottom spot and just get themselves into a playoff position. But there have been signs, I guess, some green shoots under Valakari. You're right. This is not the glamorous end of the quarter-final tie or the quarter-final draw tonight, but it's so important to both those clubs. The chance to go to Hampden, it doesn't come around all that often for these clubs. And I know St Johnstone, obviously, they've got a couple of trophies in the bag from recent seasons, but it's still a fantastic achievement to get to a Scottish Cup semi-final, and a little bit of light relief from what's been a sort of a bruising campaign so far.
Mm-hmm.
Let's try Mick again.
Can you hear us, Mick?
I can hear you, boys. Much like the conditions here, it's frozen.
The Wi-Fi's frozen over.
Can you hear us, Mick? What's your prediction for tonight then, for the last of the quarterfinals? Nah, he's gone.
Rebel says 50p in the meter, Mick, which is a good point. John says plastic Wi-Fi. Plastic Wi-Fi? I think you'd be better with 2 cans and a bit of string at this point.
Yeah, plastic pitch and plastic Wi-Fi, I'm afraid. I think Mick's contribution is over for tonight.
Mick, if you can hear us, thank you very much. I always love having Mick on as well, but there you go.
He looked like a little bit of a look in his face there, like man discovering fire, didn't he?
If he could discover Wi-Fi, that'd be good. How do you see that one going tonight, actually, while we're on it? Who do you think will get through?
Livingston at home is... the two words Livingston away, I think, are one of the most feared 2 words anywhere in Scottish football.
Aye, that's a good point.
It's just a not an enjoyable experience. Anything about Livingston away, they'll get in your face. They can play a bit as well, but they'll be aggressive. They'll be scrapping for everything, and it's just the worst pitch in Scotland. So I strongly fancy. Well, yeah, in fact, I'll go as far as that. I strongly fancy Livingston to win that one tonight.
Aye, me too. I think 2-0. 2-0, Livy. You can take that to the bank. The other thing,
isn't it?
that's it. The other thing worth mentioning, Keith, is that it's the international break coming up. Scotland squad is named tomorrow. It's tomorrow, isn't it?
Yes, it is tomorrow midday
for the playoff, the Nations League playoff against Greece, which will be a really tough game. There's a couple of people, or a couple of players that I would put forward that I think should be in the squad. And the one at the forefront of my mind right now is Luke McCowan. Now, I know Scotland are blessed in the midfield. It's where we're strongest. I mean, if Lewis Ferguson can't even get a regular game, it doesn't bode well for someone like Luke McCowan. But every time McCowan plays for Celtic, he makes an impact. Even if it's off the bench, he just stands out.
I've been really impressed by Luke McCowan in a Celtic shirt. It certainly doesn't look too big for him.
Aye.
He's handled the step up in class from Dundee to Celtic. He's taken it in his stride. He does impress me every time I see him. But Daniel, we're talking fleeting glimpses here, really. I'm afraid he'd need to be doing more than just throwing on the odd occasional decent cameo to break his way into Steve Clarke's Scotland squad. I think there would be noses out of joint if that was to be the case, and understandably so. That doesn't mean that Luke McCowan doesn't have the quality to be a Scotland player. Everything I've seen about him suggests that he probably does. But I think he'd need to get a regular run of starts before he was really banging on Steve Clarke's door. You know that Steve Clarke's really loyal to his players. Perhaps some people will say too much so. But in order for to promote somebody in there, I think Luke McCowan would need to get a run, a real proper run of starts in Celtic's midfield, rather than just looking good from the bench for 15-20 minutes. And he does look really good.
Aye.
And I am really interested to see what the progression is, because many times I've said in this show, Brendan Rodgers makes players better. That's what he does. So Luke McCowan was already in a very strong position in terms of his natural ability. You know, he's certainly a confident young guy because he's walked into that squad. He's looked around. You know, he's a Celtic fan. He knows the quality. He knows the names, and that might have been quite intimidating for some people. But he's shown that he's got the mental strength, the mental capacity to go in there and say, "I'm as good as you guys." Aye. And every time I've seen him play, he does look as good. But I just think that would be the hard part to justify putting him in on the back of being a really good Celtic substitute.
I think that's fair. After taking a pummeling for saying that I couldn't see by Barry Ferguson if he wins the next 2 games, I'm now getting slaughtered for for the Luke McCowan shout as well. So I'm having a good night.
I read you blinker, didn't you?
Marzino says Scotland are stacked in midfield, as you say, Daniel. Craigie says Conor Barron instead of McGowan. I like Conor Barron, good player, but I don't know about that.
Conor Barron had made the squad previously.
Aye.
And got there in merit because for the exact same things we were just saying, he was playing regularly in that Rangers midfield. Conor Barnes dropped out of the picture. I know that he started against Fenerbahce, and I think he'll probably start again on Thursday night. He might retain his place around the Scotland squad because he's been there before. But I think he might struggle on the same basis that he hasn't started out all that many games recently, has he? Fenerbahce, I think, was probably his first start, and
he was out in the wilderness a little bit, wasn't he? Under Clement towards the end.
Yeah, and you know when Barry Ferguson, now he's only had 3 games, but he didn't start the first 2 of them either. So it'll be interesting to see if Conor Barron retains his place in Steve Clarke's squad. I think he might suffer the same as we're just talking about Luke McCowan. If you're not playing regularly week in, week out for your club, it's difficult to justify, not in all cases, because there's been obviously famous, and Kieran Tierney's one of them, would struggle to get a game at Arsenal, but if he's fit and available, he'll be in Steve Clarke's plans, be no doubt about that. But I think you've got to earn yourself a certain status before you're considered as one of these guys that even if you're not playing regularly for your club, you have to be in the Scotland squad. We've seen examples of it, but they're more outliers than the sort of general rule. And the general rule of thumb is that you're going to have to be playing and impressing week in, week out to make it into Steve Clarke's plans.
Rebel, as you can see, says, I agree, Keith, he needs to be a Celtic regular. Marzuno says, though, Ralston's played about 3 times for Celtic this season, and of course, recent times, he's been Scotland's first choice right back.
There are exceptions to every rule. And,
that's true, and there's injuries there, isn't there?
Yeah, and at full-back, obviously, Scotland have been really unlucky, down to the bare bones in terms of right-back options, because of Hickey and Patterson injuries, and Patterson's one of these guys now that just doesn't seem. I think when David Moyes went to Everton, I wonder if Patterson might start to get a run here, a crack of the whip. But I haven't watched Everton all that closely, but I don't think he's been featuring as a starter.
No, he's not.
So he, it's a struggle for Nathan Patterson to justify getting, an invite to return to the Scotland setup. Well, he's just so far in the fringes of the first team at Everton. So yeah, and I think that's a fair point, because I'd be surprised if Tony Ralston wasn't in the squad tomorrow, because he's proven to Steve Clarke that it's not ideal. He was never first choice at Celtic in the first place when he got into the squad, but exceptions had to be made to rules, because Scotland went from a position of having 2 outstanding right backs to having to assess all options.
Your pal Gianni says, who plays right back if everyone's fit? Hickey? Probably would be Hickey, wouldn't it? Yeah,
we just hope that Hickey comes back.
It's been a while, hasn't it?
Because it's been a long time, and this is one of those horrible moments where you start to wonder: is he going to make a recovery? Is he going to come back? If he does come back, is he going to look like the Hickey that we saw when the injury occurred? You hope so, but all things being equal, Hickey being fully fit, I think he'd kind of nudged Patterson out of the position, hadn't he?
Yeah.
Shortly before getting injured, but it was two great options to have it right back. And by the way, what I would say about Tony Ralston is he's never let Scotland down. I know he had a really, really traumatic time at the Euros, particularly in the first game against Germany.
But who didn't?
But he did look as if he was struggling with that one, and the step up looked a bit much for him. But you know what? Credit to him. He rolled his sleeves up. He on with it, and you know he's had some decent performances in the Scotland shirt. He's just one of these guys, dependable.
Right.
So even though he's not getting a lot of action for Celtic, I'd be surprised if he was omitted from the squad. That's for sure. And it's interesting that Gianni's just been in touch, because I believe I'm going to his fine establishment later on for a bite to eat.
I was keeping that up my sleeve, actually, that he put in a comment earlier saying, refreshing to see you booked a table this evening. Just devastated I'm not working.
He's not in. That's good news.
Aye, that's a shame.
I find the restaurant functions better when Gianni's not there.
Shots fired, Gianni. Shots fired. The other name on the Scotland chat, George Hurst of Ipswich Town. Now, he's playing in the Premier League for Ipswich, 19 appearances this season, just the 3 goals. But the word on the street is he's in line for a call-up.
Well, you know, if timing is everything for a striker, isn't it? And he couldn't have timed his goal against Nottingham Forest any better the other night, because Steve Clarke was in the stand to watch him.
Aye.
So if the Scotland manager is going out of his way to go and have a look at somebody that has, you know, emerged as a potential candidate for a cap, and you go and watch him and he's a striker and he scores a goal, there's a pretty good chance that he's going to be in the squad tomorrow, I would have imagined. And it's going to be interesting for Steve Clarke to have a look at him in the context of amongst his squad. How does he look? How does he settle in? How does he make that step up to the international game? So yeah, I think that's fascinating, and it's I'm pretty sure it is one that Steve Clarke will want to take a look at. I think Lyndon Dykes, I'm not sure that he's available, is he?
No, he's injured now. He's out.
Yeah. So he's similar sort of stature in terms of physical presence. So I'd be really, really surprised if George Hurst wasn't in the squad.
I might as well go for the hat trick of getting slaughtered tonight and say that I would have Simon Murray, and I know I've said this before. 23 goals last season, 17 so far this season for a Dundee team, which is really sort of fallen away a little bit. I'd give him a run out. But...
Yeah, you're right. You probably will.
Probably will get the hat trick for getting slaughtered. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Good. So the Scotland squad is announced tomorrow, as we say, at noon. And I think Keith will be back to talk about it all then tomorrow night, 6 p.m. as usual.
Yep.
To pour over it all. Thank you very much for watching at home. We really appreciate it. Thanks for all the comments, as usual, in the comment section. And Keith, it's always a pleasure. Hope you have a lovely dinner tonight.
I'm hoping so.
It'll be even better. I mean, Gianni's not there, so it's guaranteed to be a wee bit better than usual.
Well, exactly. The conversation will be better.
Thanks for watching at home. Hope you can join us tomorrow.
Cheers, Daniel. Cheers, guys.